So, just as an intro for the methodology, so we asked about 50 questions to French people and about 10 questions in other countries. And these other countries are the UK, Germany, the Netherlands, Italy, and Belgium. So we can compare, of course, all of these countries, but we have more details, of course, about the French part. So some of the details that I will share with you only concern France. And this is a study that we conduct every year with Ipsos. That is the biggest survey institute in France, so it has a very good reputation, and that makes the results very reliable. So the first thing that we measure is actually awareness about crypto assets. So we ask 3 questions. Do you have heard about cryptocurrency? Have you heard about NFT? And have you heard about stablecoins? And those are the results depending on the country. So you can see that in almost every country, it is higher than 90%. Only Belgium has a, I would say, low awareness rate at 81%. And as we can expect, lots of people know more about cryptocurrency than NFT and stablecoins. And as we could also expect, the awareness about NFT is kind of decreasing. As you can see in France, in the UK, and in Italy, there have been less press articles about NFT, so less people say they have heard about it. But the awareness about cryptocurrency is actually rising. Germany, we see that in this whole study, Germany is one of the most dynamic markets. And UK specifically is decreasing a little bit. The second thing that we measure, of course, is acquisition and holding. So we asked 2 questions. Have you already bought cryptocurrency or crypto assets? And do you still hold crypto assets? So we have 2 different measures of adoption. One is acquirers, so proportion of people who have already bought. And the second one, which is logically lower, is the percentage of people who still hold crypto assets. So the interesting thing here is that, even though Belgium, for example, has quite a low awareness rate, they are above France in the acquisition level. France is actually the lowest one. 14% say they have already bought cryptocurrency. But in Germany and in the Netherlands, this number is rising to 23 and 25%. And the UK that had 19% of holders last year sees this number decreasing this year to 16%. So here it really looks like Germany and the Netherlands are the dynamic markets. And you will also see in the next slides that the amounts invested in cryptocurrency do not decrease in Germany and the Netherlands. As you could expect, but this is a number that does not really change year by year. Investors remain dominantly male. The proportion is quite similar in every country. You see that in Italy, there are a bit more women investors, and that in the UK, the investors are really more male than in other countries. But globally, it's at least 2/3 of investors who are male, and 32% investors who are female. In France, we have a bit more details about the behavior of investors as far as their savings are concerned. So basically, we compare all French people to specifically crypto holders and how they use their money and how they invest their money. So the interesting thing here is that crypto holders, they also have, for example, more stocks and a bit more gold than the average French people, meaning that the money that they put into crypto is not taken away from other assets. It's actually taken away from cash savings and pension. Honestly, I have no comparison to give you with the other countries, but I think what's interesting here in France is to show that French people, on average, 50% of their savings like in classic bank accounts, cash which is a lot. And people who own crypto tend to have less cash in their bank accounts and put it into crypto savings. So we also asked how much people invest in crypto and what is the percentage of this compared to their overall savings. And what we can see here is actually the same as the acquisition level. France is a bit late compared to other countries. And the average proportion of the savings invested in crypto assets tends to decrease. See it in the UK, but also in Italy and Belgium. But this tendency is not happening in Germany and in the Netherlands, showing once again that those are quite dynamic. Because Germany and the Netherlands, here the crypto investors invest 19 and 20% of their assets in crypto. So this is quite a good percentage, and it's not decreasing. For the first year, so I have no history here, but we have asked which cryptocurrency the crypto investors hold in their wallet or in exchanges. And this is quite interesting because we observe differences between countries. So there is a common point here, which is that Bitcoin and Ethereum are always the two first ones, as you can expect. But then, if you look at the details after Bitcoin and Ethereum, there are differences. For example, the adoption rate of Solana in Italy is really super low compared to other countries. We have no explanation. Maybe the Solana teams or foundation are not really into Italy, or maybe Italian platforms do not propose Solana as much as other assets. There are also differences, for example, in the finance coin that is very adopted in the UK, but quite low in Germany and in the Netherlands. Ripple as well has very different adoption rate. It's 30% here in the Netherlands, but only 8% in Italy. So the adoption rates are quite different, and we can expect that different platforms means that investor gets different presentation, or maybe developers communities are stronger in certain countries than in other countries. So I'm quite curious, actually, if you do have any hypothesis to why this asset is more adopted in a country than in another. It's quite interesting. You can also see that the average number of crypto assets held is not the same. UK and Germany and Belgium has a number of crypto assets that is almost 3, whereas the other countries have a lower number of crypto assets held. And yeah, that's it. And the thing that you don't see in this slide is that I think we actually included Bitcoin Cash in the list that we asked people, and we realized that this may induce people to error because some people who hold Bitcoin might also say they hold Bitcoin Cash without really knowing what it is. So the results, especially for Bitcoin, may be actually higher than what you see here, because a few of those people may have put Bitcoin Cash instead of Bitcoin. Another thing that we measure is a custody method. So basically, do you hold crypto via an exchange or via your wallet or via both? And here we see opposite dynamics. In France, for example, people own their assets compared to last year more via a third party and less via a wallet. The opposite dynamic is true in the UK, where people actually use a bit less exchanges and more their own wallet. So we do have some hypotheses about the state of regulation, the fact that in France we have security issues that may encourage people to actually use more exchanges than Ledger because they're afraid of being kidnapped in their homes and have to send crypto to someone. For example, Belgium has the same dynamic as France. So here as well, I'm quite curious about your hypothesis. Why would we see opposite dynamics between France, Belgium, and the UK, for example? But I feel it's quite interesting to understand how people think and why they would use a wallet instead of an exchange in certain countries. This year was and still is the hype of stablecoins. So of course this year we had this 10 sponsors for this study, and this year we had of course sponsors who are active in the stablecoins area. So we asked specific questions about stablecoins, and especially how stablecoins holder do use their assets and their stablecoins. So as you could expect, they mostly use it to make investments and for trading, but they also use them to make payments. And this is interesting because you see here the percentage is highly different between countries. So in France, 20%, 23% of stablecoin holders say, I use them to make a payment. But in the UK, it's more about 50% of stablecoins holders who say, I have already used my stablecoins to make a payment. So the difference here, we were wondering why there was such a difference. And we came to the conclusion that there was a correlation with the tax regulation and the tax law, because people who were less satisfied with the tax law in their countries for crypto actually use stablecoins less to make payments. So the tax satisfaction with crypto was higher in the UK and in Germany than in the three other countries. So this is the biggest correlation that we found. So this is a strong hypothesis that actually tax law is, yes, sorry.
It's also about how to classify the definition of payments. Because is it paid in retail or is it paid from private payments? So have you separated that in asking the question?
We don't give any detail. We just ask them, have you already used stablecoin to make a payment? But I personally would put sending stablecoin to a friend. Make a payment, for example, if I pay a friend for the holiday that we booked, I consider it to be a payment. But it's true, maybe in some countries it doesn't sound like a payment, so maybe the wording is actually intended, you're right. Normally, the survey company does a very long translation work, so I would hope that they use equivalent words, but you're right, it's a question we should explore.
Purchase.
Yeah, the question was payment, whereas in French it's paiement, payment, but maybe we should ask for purchase and see if there's a difference next year. We'll do that.
Purchase of goods and services.
Yeah. A question that we asked specifically to French people, but I hope that next year we can ask to other countries, is how satisfied they are with financial products. And here the thing what we thought we would demonstrate was that, okay, we expect crypto people to be less satisfied with financial products than non-crypto people. But actually, that was not true. And we found something different. And the different thing was that the people who were less satisfied with traditional financial products were people who did not have crypto yet, but who said, I'm really considering buying crypto. So we call them interested responder. So people who don't own crypto, but who say they are interested in crypto. And this is the category of people who is the least satisfied with financial products. Because people who already own crypto, basically they have already found an alternative. So maybe they were not satisfied at the bank, but anyway, they found something else, and yeah, they make their way into it. But people who are stuck, so people who are not on crypto yet, they are not satisfied with it. We asked a question about DeFi later because DeFi is starting to be a hot topic as well. And we've asked people, okay, if you had to access DeFi, would you access it via an intermediary, via your bank, via fintech, via your wallet? And actually, the answers will not surprise you, but people who have already bought cryptocurrency want to access DeFi via an exchange, so a crypto asset platform, a little bit via their wallet. But it's quite interesting to see that accessing DeFi via the wallet is not a priority for any category here. That people want to access DeFi via an intermediary, and people who do not own crypto yet actually prefer that way. And they want a trust party, they want something familiar to help them access DeFi. What was surprising to me here was actually that neobanks are surprisingly low, same as wallet. Whereas I thought that many young people who own crypto would like to access DeFi via or N26, etc. But it's actually not the case. So here it is. Thank you, everyone. I could not present all the questions, all the 50 questions that we have asked to French people, but feel free to ask me anything. And I'll try to answer. If you have any ideas or questions that we should ask next year, also tell me. I'm super curious to your thoughts.
Thank you. Yeah, Magnus, so first question, take the mic. Yes, so how do you see the impact of card this year? Do you believe, like most of the people in France, for example, who hold the crypto has declared it in the right way and paid all the taxes, do you not see, and do you see a huge problem with CARP and all the institutions now start reporting all the crypto holders and so on?
The reportings are not automatic yet. They're
Very soon. Yeah.
It's true. In France, to be honest, the biggest problem we have is that it is super complicated. So last year I had to declare, I did like 4 or 5 cash outs, and it was not high amounts, but I still wanted to do it properly, so I tried to declare my taxes. Honestly, it was a nightmare. I had to spend hours to calculate the amount of my total portfolio at the time where I did the cash out. And it took me hours, and at some point I almost gave up. And then I thought, okay, no, I'm working in crypto for so many years. I'm not, I will not be able to say I didn't know, I have to do it. But I had to subscribe to a paid service to be able to calculate everything. So I'm honestly thinking that many people actually give up just because it's super complicated. So what we actually want to do with ADAN is advocate for a simplified way to do taxes. Because even with the automatic reporting, the state will not be able to calculate automatically the taxes because the state has no visibility on your overall portfolio. And the tax you pay depends on that as well.
One question because of the taxation debate we are currently having here in Germany. You showed the slide about ownership of crypto. And since you work with Ipsos, how good are those numbers? What do you think?
You mean how reliable?
How reliable? And you've done it before, so you should.
So they are a bit more reliable in France because in France we have 2,000 respondents, and in all the other countries we have only 1,000. So it's supposed to be, it's representative.
Yeah.
But when you, for example, when you analyze the sample of crypto holders, then this sample becomes a bit small, of course. So if you study the large ones, for example, the percentage of crypto acquirers, I would say this is quite reliable. But then, for example, when you dig into the specifics of which crypto do you have, then this is a bit less reliable.
No, I'm talking about the representative part of crypto ownership because our problem here in Germany was the people that were pushing for a new taxation regime were citing from reports from crypto taxation companies. So by definition, their sample was not representative at all because it's high or professional crypto adopters what they're doing, they're buying professional tools, so we are suffering from this non-representative phase of the current discussions here. Any other question? Yes, let me bring you the mic. Please state your name as well, let me know who's talking.
Sure. Habib, my name. Just one follow-up question on the tax regime. You mentioned that the tax regime is very complex in France, so people kind of give up. Is there a benchmark country in EU that one can look up to? Hey, the simplicity of the tax regime is so good.
Usually when I talk with the French tax authorities, the example they have are actually Germany and Portugal. Portugal because the taxes are very low, and Germany because there is this exemption that I understand may not last very long. But there is an exemption about when you hold, for example, Bitcoin for more than a year, taxes don't apply, which makes it a lot easier for investors who are not professional and who are just like holding assets for a long time. But in France, what is very complicated is that every cash out or payment is a tax operation. So you have to declare it, even if you haven't made any money. And then you have to calculate the proportion of benefit that you make depending on your overall portfolio. So the calculation is complicated, specifically if you have multiple cash outs.
Okay, Marie has a question. Come in.
So, my name is Maria. I'm tax advisor actually, and I'm also a board member of Blockchain Association. So I think the German regime is very favorable due to the 1 year holding period, but still it's complicated to do your taxes anyways. You also have to collect all the data, so it's pretty complicated as well. And you were referring to the DAC 8 regime earlier, and I think for Finland, they actually record all the transaction data. We just report the aggregated transaction data. It's also the same for France, probably. and therefore it can't be used in order to identify what's actually taxable. But I think in Finland it's different, so they can actually use the data. So that's probably pretty favorable in order to determine that taxable amount. I thought it was very interesting, actually, the usage of crypto as well as also referring to the tax regime. Very interesting.
Okay, then thanks a lot. I think
Thank you,
we will all think about suggestions for your next report and survey. Thanks for that. And while I switch the slides, I welcome Magnus Jones here, presenting about studies both made in Scandinavia and in the Baltics about crypto adoption as well. Please bear with me for a second, Magnus, with the slides.
Here we are. Thank you. Yes, as mentioned, I've done a similar survey in both the Nordics and the Baltics. This is an annual thing we carry out. We have more data from Norway specifically, and the Nordics we have carried out in a similar way together with a bureau called Norstat, and where we have 1,000 respondents in each county. We have asked in the Nordic ones 8 questions and 5 in the Baltics, but we have the essence of the overall of it. So when we look into the numbers of findings, we see that Baltics and Nordics are pretty similar in itself. It lays around 10-11% Baltics and 11-ish in the Nordics. This is sort of saying what we see as more or less a standard rule of thumb if we take into errors in accounts of plus minus percentages, that around rule of thumb is around 10% of call it all civilized jurisdictions who has crypto adoption. If we break it down further, the black brackets is last year and the color one is this year. We see that we have had a little decline. Norway, Sweden has had an enormous growth from 7.4 to 13.4. We don't have a core call it explanation surrounding it. It could be mismatch in data in some kind of way here also naturally. But it has been more on the call it positive news side of ETPs, ETFs surrounding the landscape, so that could have also affected it in a way. Otherwise, we see Denmark had a little growth. Finland has had a huge decline from 11 to 8. Estonia, a little one. Latvia growing slightly. Lithuania, we just had numbers from this year in summer. So Sweden is matched up on the populations. 13.4% is the leading one in the Nordics and the Baltics. If we look into the membership rates in this country based upon the population, we see that Sweden is also leading the way there. But males are not necessarily the problem within this industry, it's rather the female ones. And here we see that Latvia is clearly leading the way with 8.5%, which is actually significantly high compared to all other countries in SOMA. And we don't have maybe a core explanation. Ryan, I'm not sure if you want to comment on it itself. We did this also presentation during the Great Unblock conference we had there, and we heard from some of the female speakers also that didn't have the core explanations, but I'm not sure, do you want to add a sentence to it?
Yes, thanks, Magnus. Only a hypothesis, not a real explanation. In Latvia, we have women holding a lot of high-level positions, even in context of EU. We have one of the highest level of higher positions in government, in high-level management, in companies that female holds. So perhaps this correlates in a way also with the crypto adoption. More free resources, higher wages for female. That's why there's higher adoption perhaps as well. But only a hypothesis, so I'm not sure.
Yeah. But at least I think it's interesting and very important to call it raise focus on this one, because that's one of the main challenges that we actually have in this industry, that we need female adoption coming on as well. So when we break down these numbers again,
you actually see the percentages of the crypto owners. The last slide was of population. These are the crypto owners. We see that Latvia here has close to 42% of all the crypto owners, that is females also. So that's in a totally different region where I would say these are normal numbers of 20-ish something percentages, while again, Latvia is exceptional here. And when we break down numbers into age groups, this is typically the curve of younger generations, etc. naturally. However, we have seen that in Nordics, Baltics is the red one, Nordics is the black. So we see that on the age groups of 40 years plus, there's a higher percentage in the Nordics compared to the Baltics, who has ownerships in crypto. Mentioning that one as an anecdote, actually, one of the reasons for the growth in Latvia was actually a little contradictory. It was a decline in the younger generation, where we had a significant increase there. So we also saw that specifically in Sweden, that was also one of the drivers. So it's not necessarily that it's the de facto younger generation, but that can also depend on some things that we have talked about, like taxes, etc. So for example, I will come back to it, but in Sweden, it's very popular to hold ETPs, ETFs, that it might be easier to convince your accountant, your lawyers, your auditors surrounding buying these assets, and that's normally rather the old elderly groups that is buying these types of products and could lead to the growth. I'm not saying that's the case for Latvia, but it's at least interesting to put into consideration that it's not a one-to-one stereotypically thing, that it's only younger people who owns crypto. When we see call it the future positiveness towards ownership of how you are expected to buy crypto within a certain time frame. We saw that last year on the black brackets, Finland was, call it, over-optimistic with 41%, that had a huge decline. Things need to be taken into consideration. Where are we on, call it, the crypto cycles? If we refer to that one, has it been a good year, a bad year previously towards that is? So it's not a one-to-one that everyone is positive or whatever, but at least we see that this year as well, there's lots of positiveness towards Latvia, where we, in many other cases, have seen great declines, like in Norway, in Denmark, in Finland, Estonia, etc. So this is just some indicators, at least towards the future perspective, if you are going to buy crypto in the future. But like we also have briefly touched upon, an important element is not to see one-to-one who owns it, because there's a difference between owning and actually using it in practice, or then we can look into, call it, wealth perspectives. And we see also that even though we have great growth in Baltics, and naturally, based upon population, the numbers will become smaller. But when we look into one-to-one estimated ownership, we see that Sweden has estimately a wealth of 10 billion US dollars. So clearly leading the way in Nordics and the Baltics there, in addition to that they had the highest also ownership in itself. And here again, if we break down these numbers and see then of how large of a value you have back to the ownership, is it like it is actually 10-12% of the population who is in crypto actively using it? And I would like to challenge that and say no. If you see there, we see numbers of benchmark, regardless of where you are, 85% of the population-ish has less than 5,000 US dollars in a value. It's very few that has the, call it, conception that we're riding a Lambo and are so happy leveraging on our cryptos. It's rather this side, the smaller side, and where we can also see deviation towards actually the ownership per se of how active you are in. And if you take into the per capita numbers that we have, we see that around 800 to 1,000-ish is in Nordics, the average for the capita per population, while it lays naturally due to the numbers of capitas in the Baltics a little lower. So overall, we see here approximately down to the numbers and not percentages also. A bit more than 1 million people in Sweden owns it, 500,000-ish in Denmark, Norway, 400-ish in Finland, 300, 200, 100-ish going down to all of the Baltics in so much. So approximately 3 million people in total in Baltics and Nordics, equal to 11% of the population who owns crypto in itself. We also have some findings here in the end that is more specific because we don't have data from all of the countries. But I think this one is interesting to look into. This is data from Norway specifically because we have a longer history there, and also where we compare stocks and shares, equity ownership compared to crypto. So this one shows age group 40 years below. This one shows 40 years above. So as you can see, for actually now 7 consecutive years, we have had a higher ownership. The black ones are crypto, the red ones own stocks and shares. That age group of 40 years younger, you see a clear separation between that they actually own crypto compared to stocks and shares. Not in value per se of it, but the pure ownership. While here, it's like I said, it's the same person that has been owning that for the whole time. Now it's even a little bit more, but we see the variation of it. And I think that's an important thing to take into concern, not one-to-one, but when we talk about crypto in general, it's rather down to how fast this will shift. And this one is a shift that will come in the 10-year plus perspective coming up, not tomorrow, not in 3 years. So it's rather to understand the sequence of what's happening here in the longest perspective rather than seeing yourself blindly of the mix-up of things. And this data we have now also here from Sweden this year, where we say clearly the same thing, more ownership here on crypto compared to stocks and shares, and vice versa on there. It's just that the survey bureau is splitting it for some reason in the age group of 50 compared to 40, but still it's the same indications that we see. If you look into Denmark, we see it's not that big of a difference, but still it is the same pattern that we see all over. So it's just like it's not one-to-one, but it's a clear indication that 40 years younger, regardless of where you look, they have more crypto compared to stocks and shares. We have also asked questions surrounding why you have left crypto. And this is just one example from Norway, but it's representative, I would say, from all of them, that the main reason was to realize profits or they had lost belief in it. It's not that many might have thought, it's actually for the reasons you need to pay your taxes in some manner. That was either totally out of the list or in the bottom. So it's rather here to say realize they lost money, they lost faith, compared to others like selling to buy back later. So it's more or less also confirming that the ones who's in crypto, they're like hodling on this side in it. And like it was mentioned here, no surprise, BTC is leading the way in Nordic Baltics. This is just one example from the Norwegian survey, but still they're representative. So from the overall Nordic Baltic overview, you can see here that the preferred ones are BTC, it's ETH, XRP, Solana, and Doge that are the preferred ones in that order. Call it DeFi side and also stablecoin side are on the lower side all over, I would say. It's a little variation towards which one you prefer there. But again, like it was mentioned, a survey out of 1,000, you have 100 that says they have crypto. It's very difficult to measure exactly the huge variation compared to what you are answering and whether or not you are bothered to tick the whole list of which one in so much. So this is one up for error, but I think in general, what we see regardless of where you are, that these are very representative with specifically Bitcoin and Ethereum leading the way. Also in some matter, looking into where people buy their crypto assets, we see a lot of different variation compared to different countries, whether or not this is from Norway, where we see Fiji as one of the local ones, is clearly leading the way. Even taking out Coinbase and Binance, who naturally have had a long, strong position over the years, but these varies a lot. But it's more like it's interesting to look on to this side also to see like the ETP side, for example, in Norway, where we only have 4% surrounding that one. But when we look into Sweden, for example, we see here that's 23%. And that's just because of tax reasons why that is popular. So it does make sense to buy it in Norway, but this is for tax reasons. So here also you see the Swedish local ones are fellow, only at 12%, while here Coinbase is 20%. So it's a huge variation between the different countries compared to where you call it put your trust or where you're used to the leverage on buying, sell, or selling your crypto assets. And it was mentioned in the previous talk here, also taxes. And being a tax lawyer myself, we have looked into this one. And actually, this is not a surprise. This is from the Norwegian Tax Administration's data. You see here, owners who has reported their taxes in the light gray fields there, compared to the estimated owners over the years. So naturally, it's not been a significant amount. They are leading up to 73,000 persons. But we know that there's estimately 500,000 who has crypto assets. And then, of course, the media, so they write in general, look at this. This is what I said all the way. It's only criminals. It's only anarchists. No one wants to report it. No one wants to pay their taxes. This is insane. We need to do something here. We again then rather took the opposite view around and said, well, we can look into the facts of things there. Because we know how much Norwegian has reported de facto. That's what they have reported. And we know also that we can take an estimate out of all the crypto owners' total wealth. And that is pretty accurate. I will get back to it in the next slide, but the Norwegian Central Bank has also carried out a survey surrounding this one. So based on statistics, we can find out approximately how large the total income is. So we see here that it was reported for tax year 40 million Norwegian crowns, while here we estimate in 2025 that it's 61 million. So it means that that little percentage that is actually reporting crypto in Norway, that seems very low, they have reported in total for estimately 66% of all the values. So that means that this numbers that we saw here is not representative in it. It's actually up here. And then we need to take into account the fact that we saw from the slide, the majority of people has crypto for a very small amount. Many might not even know they have crypto. And in this matter, we are actually more close to, I would say, 100 compared to 0, as it seems like there, where the media has put their focus. So actually, when we presented this slide for the first time, the Norwegian Tax Administrations kindly begged us to be able to use that slide for their internal budget negotiations, because they hadn't even thought about it themselves. So this is also how we fronted as an industry. To summarize it, as the last slide, this is a brand new survey from the Norwegian Central Bank. They have asked 10,000 persons, not 1,000 like we did, but still we see they find the same patterns. As I said, you can go down to details, whatever, but in general, they found that 97% of all Norwegians have heard about crypto, while 12% owns it. Our survey showed 11%-ish. And I think that's also a very important thing to say, even though that close to all of Norway has heard about it, 70% of them says, I have little to no knowledge surrounding this landscape at all. And when we said this about estimated crypto wealth, they found ish 37 billion, while we had estimated 39. So we see that matches up pretty well in terms of the tax statistics that I just mentioned also. Again, like I said, the rule of thumb is 85% in our space has a value of less than 5,000 euros or dollars in crypto. They found that 77% has less than 50,000 Norwegian crowns, which is 5,000 euros. They also looked into the stablecoin areas, mainly using for trading and not for payment everyday use, was their findings in SOMAR. The DeFi side is more or less the same as called NFT landscape.
They are correlated towards each other. So I would say, call it 1% of the crypto owners are into that one in one way or the others. They also asked about crypto regulation, and only 17% says they are even aware that we have a legislation surrounding crypto in this landscape. But again, that correlates to 70% have no knowledge surrounding this space. 42% says that clearer guidance from authorities would make them more likely to invest, correlated again to what I just mentioned. And what we see here, the same Bitcoin, Ripple, Solana, etc., that are the preferred ones. 38% plans to hold the same level of crypto assets in the next following years, while 21% plan to increase their holdings, and 30% plan to reduce their holdings, and 28% are uncertain. So it correlates pretty well with the data that we have had here. I can also mention that the tax administration, they carry out this type of survey twice a year. They do not publish the number, but I get insights in the numbers, and they matches perfectly well. So if someone has also picked up and noticed that the Danish central bank did a similar survey a couple of months ago, well, they then only found that it was 4% of Danes, apparently, who had crypto assets. And when we look into that one, I think it's down to the how you ask and how you get answers. That's why I also asked in terms of how is the question positioned. Because they didn't ask like we do you own Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies? They asked, do you own digital assets? And that's a confusion in itself. So I talked to the central bank there. They said, well, we totally agreed, but from the political stand, they were not allowed to use the word crypto in the survey, even for their own guidelines. So then it's just as an anecdote if you see towards the challenges that lays there. So you get answers towards how you ask. So even the Norwegian central bank, they questioned if 4% was right. So I don't believe that 4% is right in terms of it, but it might be 4% that is actually relevant towards who is the core users, while owners is more than around 10%. So with that, you can find the reports. It's also a video from all of these countries of Norway, Sweden, Finland, Latvia, Estonia, and Lithuania, where we've had experts on commenting on all of this. So you can download it there. And again, we're very thankful for all our great partners who have supported us on this journey. And this is some topics about me. So if you're interested to get more details, if you want to call it editable slides or whatever, more than happy to share. I'm more than happy to take any questions.
Thanks a lot. Let me start with the most obvious question. We were seeing now the numbers that you put together for the Nordics and Baltics, and you have presented the numbers for France. How important are these kinds of representative studies in your discussions with stakeholders, especially at the government level, because we don't have, let's say, a similar type of quality studies here in Germany?
You know, I think it's key and important because regardless of who you talk to, whether or not that's authority, a government, or a financial service banking provider, the only thing they care about is facts and numbers and the statistics. So that's the clear thing. But again, like I showed, it's all about how you read or present these statistics, because like they also know, you can get a graphical whatever way you would like to, all depending on how you put X and Y's. So I think it's very important that we also have the cross-correlating facts of different surveys, so they can show a similar direction, and it also helps us a lot. But also the tax administration and the central bank are doing these surveys, so it's not like, well, it's the crypto bros that says this one, but it's actually matching up towards the facts of the real landscape.
Okay, thank you. And maybe a consideration before Claire comes with the next question. Maybe in your next surveys, we could also include somewhat political and strategic questions, like how desirable would it be for you to have a Swedish krona-based stablecoin?
Yeah, we don't even have to ask that question because we actually have a Swedish stable issued by all entities, so that's already taken care of in terms of that one. But no, on the serious side, of course, we would like to ask even more questions. But to be very honest about how the market is now, it's challenging to just get partners in to cover the costs for the questions we already had. So we would love to do more questions and specifically ones that you have.
Okay. You will be tokenized with refinance. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I have lots of questions, but I'm not going to answer more. At what time of the year do you ask the question? We do ask in January, so we're starting to be a bit late. But
Historically, we have always asked the questions in mid and February.
and I do have another question because I saw in one of your slides that USDT has a larger adoption than, for example, USDC.
Yep.
And we see the same thing in other European countries. And I was wondering if you had any hypothesis for this, because given that Nika makes USDT not so legal anymore in many exchange platforms, how do you explain that USDT still has this kind of
That's very simple because all the users of USDT, they don't care about it and they're not even aware of it. They're into DeFi, they use it there, they're perfectly happy, it functions very well, they're not in breach of anything. You can legally hold Tether. That's not illegally to do. So that's where we clearly see it because de facto there's no use cases at all for whether or not it's the dollar version or euro version. Currently, to do payments in the Nordics or Baltics per se is a very small percentage, and that's just down to ask yourself the question. If you're a private person, of course it could make sense in one case or other, but most likely you would like liquidity. And de facto, Tether has better worldwide global liquidity than Circle. So in this matter, I see it just of these use cases that there's naturally a higher percentage that is using Tether compared to Circle right now. If you look into the business perspective, there's close to zero who use it. There's only currently one vendor, to my knowledge, who can handle it from the ERP system level, and that's SAP. And even if you go in to talk to SAP, I have invited Balva to my presentations or to my palace in Davos 2 years in a row now since they launched this one. And it's not like this is a skyrocketing thing even in Germany or other places. The infrastructure is actually not in place yet to handle these, call it business-to-business transactions. So this is why it's the, call it DeFi users that is leading to the Tether position is my take. I'm not sure if you had any other findings on it.
well, the difference was not as high as what I saw on the slides for our countries, but yeah, the biggest explanation is DeFi, of course, where USDT is still very attractive. I also do know that some large platforms still list USDT, even though they shouldn't, but still they do. So that could be another explanation. But it's true. I'm actually wondering why there is such a demand for USDT, even though it's harder to buy it and sell it on platforms.
Yeah, and again, like we saw on one of these slides, it might be huge differentiations, but I can assure you, if you look into all of the 7 ones, that's even just very. So it's not like Tether is up there compared to Circle. But I would also say, if you look into the real use cases, doing a business-to-business payment in Norway, in Sweden, or in Denmark, and even in Germany, it doesn't make sense per se to use a stable. It could make sense sort of to do it cross-border, but the maturity level is not there yet because you have the challenges of just handling technically to get it into their systems. So it's rather the cross-border things. And then again, it's back to the liquidity globally. So what we see, for example, in one of the companies that I represent, K33, where I'm a board member, the chairman of the board, he is within shipping. And there, they pay their crew using stablecoins, not the shipping company directly, but the third party facilitates the crew. So there, everyone is saying, well, the crew, they need something that has liquidity in all world corners. What is that? That's Tether that they use. So I think it's also correlated to the ones who actually are using it directly and are enough to not say, we don't need it integrated into the accountment departments and so on, but they have a wallet, they manage to deal with it, they set it up, they actually prefer tether based on, again, the liquidity and number of chains they are. Not that circular, not on the same amount, but if you see my point towards the operational side of flow of things.
Any other questions? I'm not looking at Joachim, but you might have one. Okay. So let's take down a few notes for ourselves. So we heard a few ideas about additional questions. We are in need of partners to finance it and to maybe also compare the methodology used across Europe. Here in Germany with Bundesblock, I think we will maybe try to interview treasurers because we were just mentioning the lack of, let's say, systemical readiness to really use the stablecoins, and if we are politically pushing for it, and I think that's one of the few smallest common denominators that we will find between, let's say, existing power structures in the country and in Europe and our industry, that we should have a euro-based or Swedish krona-based or whatever European stablecoins. But if industry can't digest it, if there are still uncertainties about how to keep them in the books and under which, let's say, bookkeeping regime, then we need to also educate decision makers about it. Otherwise, this will not fly. So thanks a lot, Magnus. We can of course still mingle for a few minutes. We might need to then start, moving around chairs and tables for the Mika roundtable. Thank you everybody for attending this morning, and have good conversations.